So imagine you're reading this foundational legal document, something that literally shapes the entire structure of society, the justice system, and like how we inherently view right and wrong.
Okay, wow. No pressure.
Right. And you study it, you live by it, generations are raised on its principles, and then thousands of years later, you discover a typo.
Oh no, a typo.
Yeah, just this tiny, seemingly insignificant grammatical error that, well, it completely flips the meaning of the core law.
I mean, that shifts the ground completely.
Yeah.
You'd have to reevaluate every societal structure built on top of that document. Just questioning whether the reality you've been living in was based on an illusion.
Exactly. And that is the paradigm-shifting territory we are stepping into today. We're looking at excerpts from a truly fascinating book by Kim Chang-ho titled Mythos and Logos of Eden.
Yeah, it's a really intense read.
It is. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore how a microscopic translation choice involving literally a single ancient Hebrew word might have completely altered Western thought, religious dogma, and, even our own modern psychological concepts of right and wrong.
Yeah, and before we really jump in, we should probably do a quick impartiality check here.
Oh, definitely. Good call.
The text presents a really provocative critique of mainstream religious doctrines. So our goal today is not to, take sides or to validate or endorse a specific theology.
Right, we're not here to preach.
Exactly. We are just here to impartially unpack the author's linguistic arguments and see what we can learn from this highly unique perspective.
Because regardless of your personal background, whether you grew up deeply embedded in a religious community or you've never even opened a Bible in your life, the concepts found in the book of Genesis, they really form the bedrock of so much of modern society's thought processes.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere in Western culture.
Yeah, and the source material argues that distortions in these ancient texts actually have a direct negative impact on our mental health today. Like, it shapes how we judge ourselves and how we judge everyone around us.
Which is wild to think about. A typo affecting mental health.
Right. So to understand this massive cultural impact, we have to start at the grammatical root of the issue, specifically this ancient Hebrew preposition.
Yeah, so the word we really need to examine is mimmenu.
Right. In the original Hebrew of Genesis, mimmenu is a compound word. It's made up of the preposition min, which means from, combined with a pronominal suffix.
Okay, tracking so far.
And, well, Hebrew prepositions change their form when they combine with these suffixes. This specific morphing is where the historical fork in the road appears.
All right, let's make sure the mechanics of this make sense for everyone. In English, we have words that look identical, but change meaning entirely based on the context of the sentence.
Oh, right, like homographs. Yeah, like the word read, I read the book yesterday, versus I will read the book tomorrow. It's the exact same spelling, but the tense is totally dictated by the words around it. Are we talking about a similar linguistic trap here?
It's similar, yeah, but the ambiguity with mimmenu is rooted in pronouns, which, that makes it even more volatile.
Volatile how?
Well, a closer parallel might be how certain languages use possessive suffixes. Think of the Spanish word su, which can mean his, hers, yours, or theirs.
Oh, wow, that's a lot of options.
Right. If you just see the word su by itself, you have absolutely no idea who the object belongs to unless you look closely at the rest of the sentence.
Got it. So the surrounding context is literally the only lifeline the translator has.
Context is everything here. Because of the way Hebrew morphology works, when the word min, meaning from, combines with a first-person plural suffix, meaning our or us,
Okay.
it becomes minu. However, when min combines with a third-person masculine singular suffix, meaning his or it also becomes mimmenu.
Wait, the exact same phonetic and written word?
The exact same word. It can mean from us, or it can mean from it.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That is a massive decision for a translator to navigate. One path implies a collective group of people or, divine beings, and the other path points to a singular object.
Exactly. Now, apply that pressure to the story of the Garden of Eden. What's fascinating here is that the word mimmenu appears exactly 7 times in chapters 2 and 3 of Genesis.
7 times, okay.
2 times in chapter 2 and 5 times in chapter 3. In the first 6 instances, the ancient translators looked at the context, which is, heavily focused on the various trees in the garden.
Right, the tree of life, tree of knowledge.
And they uniformly translated mimmenu as from it or of it, clearly referring to a tree.
Well, that establishes a very clear rhythmic pattern, right? If I'm reading a recipe where the word batter is used 7 times,
Yeah.
And 6 times it clearly means the cake mix, but on the 7th time, the translator suddenly decides it means a baseball player. Why the sudden switch?
That is the perfect analogy. You would
Yeah.
expect it to stay the same. But we get to the 7th instance, which is Genesis chapter 3, verse 22, and the translators abruptly switched paths.
They just abandoned the pattern.
Totally abandoned it.
How do I abandon?
They translated mimmenu not as from it, referring to the tree, but as one of us.
Which gives us the famous line, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil.
Yes.
So they looked at a word that had meant the tree for 2 entire chapters and suddenly, on a whim, decided it meant a divine collective.
And the author of our source material views this break in the pattern as a catastrophic error. Like, according to the text, in all 7 instances, the grammatical context is clearly pointing directly to the tree.
So it shouldn't be us at all.
No.
Yeah.
Therefore, mimmenu should absolutely be translated as from it every single time it appears in that sequence.
Okay, let's follow the author's logic and reconstruct the text then. If we remove the phrase, like one of us, basically erasing the whole idea that humans gain some sort of divine status, how does the corrected translation of Genesis 3.22 read?
The corrected translation fundamentally alters the trajectory of the narrative. It should read, "The man has become one with it in knowing good and evil."
Wow.
Yeah, in this sentence being the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Become one with it. I mean, that completely changes the core conflict of the human condition.
It really does.
Because in the traditional reading, humanity is punished for essentially stealing divine status. The narrative is always, you've become like God, so you are banished. But the source is arguing that we didn't become gods at all.
Right. We didn't gain divine wisdom. The text points out a crucial, a recurring motif in the Bible. Trees are frequently used as metaphors for human beings.
Oh, yeah.
By eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the metaphor implies that humans became trees of knowledge themselves.
Okay, wait, I need to push back on the logic here just a little because that feels like a massive leap to me.
Go for it.
If I eat an apple, I don't physically turn into an apple tree. So why does the author leap from the act of consuming a fruit to the human essentially metamorphosing into the tree itself?
No, it's a totally fair challenge.
Mm.
But the text isn't suggesting like a biological digestion, right? It's illustrating a psychological and spiritual transformation.
Okay, so more abstract.
Yeah. When you consume something in these ancient metaphors, you are internalizing its fundamental nature. You are taking its properties into your core being.
Oh, I see.
If humanity internalizes the knowledge of good and evil, our core operating system shifts. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we stop relying on the inherent flow of life and start generating our own arbitrary fruit.
Meaning our own opinions.
Exactly. We become standalone entities that evaluate, judge, and categorize the world.
So we basically become a walking, talking apparatus of judgment.
Yes.
We look at our neighbors, our circumstances, our own reflections in the mirror, and we just categorize everything. Like, this is good, that is bad, I am right, you are wrong.
And the source describes this state as the tragic existential limit of human beings. Like, we are confined to navigating reality through this highly subjective lens of good and evil.
But we act like it's objective truth.
Exactly. We firmly believe our individual judgment is absolute universal reality.
Man, that is an exhausting way to live.
Tell me about it.
When you realize that the phrase wasn't humans becoming like gods, but rather humans becoming trapped in the relentless cycle of our own subjective morality, the story becomes much more of a psychological warning.
It's a completely different genre almost.
Yeah, and we missed that core message entirely just because of the translation of mimmenu.
Well, and the implications of correcting that translation go far beyond psychology.
How so?
Once you establish that humans did not become like God by knowing good and evil, you are forced to reevaluate the rest of the text. Specifically, you have to ask.
Ooh,
Actually,
nice.
introduce the idea that God's primary characteristic is the binary knowledge of good and evil.
Right. If it wasn't God saying they have become like us, we have to look earlier in the narrative.
We do.
We have to look at the serpent, Genesis 3.5.
Yes, in Genesis 3.5, the serpent is attempting to convince humanity to eat the fruit. And the serpent says, God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.
Oh, my goodness. The serpent is the entity that originally planted the concept.
Yep.
The serpent defined the divine as a supreme judge of binary morality.
And the author argues this is the inception of what the text calls the serpent's theology.
Serpent's theology, that's a strong phrase.
It is. The serpent projected its own nature onto the divine, basically creating an image of a deity obsessed with rigid categories of right and wrong.
Wow.
When ancient translators bought into the mistranslation of Genesis 3.22, and when humanity subsequently believed that by knowing good and evil we had achieved a godlike state, we essentially adopted the serpent's theology as our foundational religious truth.
So what does this all mean? Think about the magnitude of that claim for a second. The author is suggesting that for centuries, mainstream religious thought has been anchored to the antagonist's definition of God,
That's the argument, yeah.
viewing the divine primarily as a cosmic punisher of bad deeds and a rewarder of good deeds completely flips the script on how Western civilization views religious morality.
It really does. And the author uses a striking metaphor to illustrate the danger of this paradigm. They explore the concept of dogmatism, stating that dogmatism is the fundamental, venomous nature of the serpent.
Okay, the venom.
Right. And the strict, unyielding doctrines that enforce that dogmatism are categorized as the serpent's fangs.
Okay, let's bring that out of the abstract and look at how it actually manifests. How does a religion take that serpent-driven idea of a rewarding and punishing God and turn it into these dogmatic fangs?
Well, it happens through the weaponization of subjectivity.
Weaponized subjectivity. I like that.
A religious institution adopts the framework of a God who demands good and punishes evil. But the catch is that good inevitably becomes defined as whatever aligns with their specific subjective doctrine.
Right. It's not universal good, it's their good.
Exactly. For example, the text points out that in certain Christian contexts, the act of believing in Jesus is strictly defined as the ultimate good, and anything contrary to that specific belief is defined as evil, resulting in eternal damnation.
Right, right. It is the ultimate tragic manifestation of being a tree of knowledge. You plant yourself in the ground, you decide that your specific branch of knowledge is the absolute divine truth.
Yes.
And everyone else who doesn't look like your branch is fundamentally wrong or evil.
It's subjectivity disguised as a divine mandate. And the source makes a profound historical connection to demonstrate how deeply embedded this conflict is within the biblical narrative itself.
What's the connection?
It points to the life of Jesus, noting that his primary conflict was not with secular authorities like the Romans, but with the rigid, dogmatic religious leaders of his day.
Oh, the scribes and the Pharisees.
Exactly.
The people who were the most obsessed with the strict rules of good and evil. The ones enforcing the law down to the smallest detail.
Right. And when Jesus confronted these enforcers of dogmatic morality, he didn't just criticize their behavior. He called them a brood of vipers.
Oh, wow. The symbolic offspring of the serpent.
Yes.
He was drawing a direct linguistic line from their obsession with dogmatic rules back to the serpent's theology in the garden.
Exactly. By policing the world through their own subjective definitions of good and evil, they were acting as agents of the serpent, not the divine.
That is so intense.
And the author argues that this dynamic isn't isolated to ancient history. Whenever a religion, a political movement, or honestly any ideology becomes obsessed with classifying who is good and who is evil based on its own strict rules,
Yeah.
it is operating under the influence of the serpent. It is yielding the fangs of dogma.
It really cascades through history, doesn't it? All tracing back to that mistranslated word, mimmenu. If we don't realize we are trapped as subjective trees of knowledge, we walk around acting like our personal judgments are absolute decrees.
We do.
It makes you wonder about the timeline of this error. Like, this couldn't have been a recent mistranslation?
Oh, no. The source traces the history of this mistranslation all the way back to the Septuagint.
The ancient Greek translation.
Right. That places the origin of this grammatical pivot a couple of centuries before the Common Era.
Wow.
So this interpretation has been silently shaping human thought, philosophy, and jurisprudence for millennia.
For thousands of years, this translation has been quietly endorsing the idea that evaluating right and wrong makes us divine, rather than recognizing that constant evaluation as our tragic existential limitation.
Right. It's seen as a feature, not a bug.
And it creates a tremendous psychological burden to wake up every day and play judge and jury for the universe. I mean, it fractures societies.
Which leads to a profound reassessment of the moral laws that emerge from this text.
I can imagine.
If our entire concept of God has been heavily influenced by the serpent's theology, the rules given by that God take on a radically different dimension.
Okay, so where does the author go with that?
The author addresses this by re-examining the Ten Commandments.
Oh, this fundamentally rewires the text.
It does. The author specifically targets one of the most famous commandments, the one about taking the Lord's name in vain.
Okay, the traditional understanding of do not take the Lord's name in vain is usually reduced to a rule against casual swearing, right? Like stubbing your toe and yelling out the divine name, or using God as a cheap expletive.
Yeah, that is the common cultural interpretation.
Yeah.
But the source material argues that this commandment has absolutely nothing to do with casual speech or profanity.
Really? Then what is it?
In the ancient Hebrew context, taking a name in vain means to call upon it emptily, falsely, or for a deceptive purpose.
Okay, so how does the author connect that definition to the serpent's theology?
This raises an important question, and the shift is staggering. The author argues that if you call upon God while holding on to the serpent's framework meaning, if you view God merely as a binary judge of good and evil who operates according to your dogmatic rules,
Yeah.
you are the one taking the name in vain.
Wait, let me process the weight of that.
Take your time.
If I look at a political conflict, or, say, a cultural debate, and I declare, God is on my side because my ideology is good and God will punish my opponents because their ideology is evil, I am actively taking the name in vain.
That's what the text argues.
Because I am invoking a false, localized concept of the divine just to validate my own subjective judgment.
According to the text, yes. Whenever humanity uses divine authority to justify their own subjective moral framework, they are effectively weaponizing that ancient translation error.
Man.
They're slapping a divine label onto the serpent's theology. To call on God purely as a mechanism to enforce your own system of reward and punishments is to hollow out the divine name. It renders the concept of the divine vain, empty, and entirely self-serving.
That changes the lens through which you view almost all of human history.
It really does.
When you look back at the religious wars, the inquisitions, the systemic cruelties that have been justified by people, absolutely convinced they were enacting the righteous will of a God of good and evil.
Right, they thought they were doing good.
Yeah. They weren't serving the divine. According to this author, they were just acting out their inherent nature as trees of knowledge. They were trapped in their own limited perspectives, blindly swinging the fangs of dogma at anyone who didn't share their subjective reality.
It's a sobering historical analysis, and it requires a deep level of introspection, right?
Yeah.
It forces you to look at the foundations of your own certainties.
Definitely.
How often do we elevate our personal opinions or our cultural norms to the level of absolute truth? How often do we disguise our own judgment as universal mandates?
And that brings us right to the heart of why this deep dive matters to you, the listener, right now, today. Because you don't need to be debating ancient Hebrew morphology or attending a theological seminar to feel the friction of this concept in your daily life. The tree of knowledge mindset, this relentless, inescapable need to categorize people, actions, and ideas into rigid boxes of good and evil based entirely on our own limited views. That is the defining struggle of our current era.
Oh, it permeates every layer of modern interaction.
Just look at our digital landscapes. Look at social media algorithms designed to outrage us, or our incredibly polarized political systems. It's an endless cycle of us versus them dogmatism.
We're exhausted by it.
We are. We are all exhausted from the constant pressure of judging everything around us, and equally exhausted from the fear of being judged in return.
Yeah.
We are walking around like a dense forest of judgment trees, each of us absolutely convinced that our specific branch holds the ultimate objective truth. And the source argues brilliantly that this isn't a sign of our intellectual or spiritual elevation, it is our existential trap.
But the text diagnosing this trap is powerful, and it doesn't leave us without an alternative.
Okay, good. We need some hope here.
Right. As we conclude our analysis of mythos and logos of Eden, there's a final concept from the source material that offers a different path forward.
I'm all ears.
The text points out a crucial, often overlooked dichotomy in the garden narrative. It states that if you eat of the tree of knowledge, you become a tree of knowledge.
Right, trapped in the judgment cycle.
Exactly. You become trapped in that rigid cycle of subjective judgment we've spent this time unpacking. However, the text also notes that if you eat of the fruit of life, you become a tree of life.
A tree of life. Well, that sounds incredibly peaceful compared to the venom of the serpent's theology we've been examining.
It does, right. It represents a fundamental shift in how we process reality. So the question I want to leave you, the listener, to ponder is this. In a modern world that is completely obsessed with identifying and punishing wrong and rewarding subjective right, what would it actually look like in your own daily life to stop consuming the fruit of knowledge? What would it require to step out of the exhausting role of judge and jury and instead seek out the fruit of life.
That's beautiful. How do we stop merely judging the world, categorizing it into neat little boxes, and start actually living in harmony with it? Because if we can figure that out, maybe we can finally correct that ancient typo in the legal document of our own minds. Thank you for taking this journey with us today. Keep questioning your assumptions, keep seeking knowledge, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.
히브리어 단어 미mmenu 성서의 속의 그림자들이 창세기 속 그 구절 잘못 쓰기니 하나님을 오해하게 되었네. 뱀의 관점 스며들 때 인간은 미혹에 빠지게 돼. 선한 나무와 같은 존재라 스스로 판단 기준이 되었네. 문맥을 따라 바르게 읽어야 진실이 보이길 바래. 교조주에 벗어나 인간의 한계 똑바로 봐. 신의 이름 망령돼 부르지 말고 신점한 생명의 길을 찾아. 고착된 해석에 들이며 성서가 말하는